Hey guys, been a while since I put a video up on here. I've had some people ask me some pretty insightful questions on Twitter, so I hope to get a couple more videos up soon about some of those questions and help you guys out. But for today, I'm going to be going over a presentation I just gave at Ron Woolforth's coaches camp at the Texas Baseball Ranch on all the pitches I throw, how to generate extra rotations per minute, the specific spin axis that you're looking for to generate the movement you're looking for. Hope you guys enjoy. Okay, so a couple things to understand first before we get going. The ball is never actually consciously released from the hand in the throw. It exits the hand as the hand and the arm is making the transition from the acceleration phase to the deceleration phase of the throw. I really dislike the term release point because of that reason, but I haven't thought of a better way to describe it yet. If you have any ideas, leave me a comment and let me know. The second thing, and it kind of goes hand in hand with that, is this happens extremely quickly and way too quickly for any sort of conscious thought. So trying to manipulate spin and spin axis with a movement of the wrist or a movement of the fingers, it's extremely hard to time up and a very ineffective way to actually generate spin on a pitch. So in order to combat that, a more effective way to generate spin and generate axis is to have your wrist locked in a specific position, a specific orientation as you're going through the throw. That way, when the ball exits your hand, you're not trying to move your wrist, and it's more consistent, and you can generate more RPM and a more consistent spin axis that way, as opposed to trying to consciously manipulate it. Alright, so this is my four-seam fastball. I have a couple goals for the pitch. One, I want as little movement as possible. I want to create an axis of rotation perpendicular to the line of travel of the ball to accomplish this. And I want as many RPMs as possible on this pitch. So notice how my hand is going from a supinated position before release to a pronated position after release. This is what I talked about earlier as the hand is changing from the acceleration phase to the deceleration phase through the release of the pitch itself. Also, you can see from the top angle that the ball is coming off of my pointer and middle finger almost simultaneously, thus creating the axis of rotation that I'm looking for, which is perpendicular to the line of travel to home plate. So on my cut fastball, I want to generate about 4 or 5 inches of movement to my glove side, mostly on a lateral plane. Some vertical movement is fine. So to do that, I need to generate an axis of rotation that is slightly tilted. It's kind of hard to talk about it without demonstrating, but if you imagine from the top angle, on the four-seam axis of rotation, it is perpendicular to the plate. If you're looking at it from the same angle, on the cutter, you want to see the axis, the right-hand side of the ball shifts slightly forward towards the plate, so you get an axis of rotation with the right-hand side of the ball slightly closer to the plate than the left-hand side of the ball. That's going to create the movement towards the glove side. Another thing on this is it's a fastball. That's an important thing to remember. So we're not trying to come around the ball. We're trying to throw it just like a fastball with slightly off-axis rotation, and that's going to generate the movement we want. But because the hand is slightly off to the side of the ball, we're not actually getting the kind of velocity that we do on a fastball. So it's going to be mine is about 6 miles an hour, 4 to 6 miles an hour slower than my four-seam fastball, which is fine. That's exactly what I'm looking for. If you look at it when I slow it down, you'll notice that, again, I'm pronating through the pitch. I'm pronating through the release, I should say. And you'll see, if I single frame here, you'll see that the ball is actually coming off my pointer finger last, which is slightly different because most people think that breaking pitches come off of the middle finger last, but you can see here it's actually coming off my pointer finger, which is an indication that I am actually pronating the pitch and not kind of coming around the outside of the ball. This is going to help me generate more RPM, which is going to help me have what most people would deem later movement, even though we know that's Not exactly the case. Pitches don't have earlier or later movement, they just have a specific movement. But this is going to help keep the ball straighter and minimize the movement, so it's going to look like a fastball to the hitter's eye longer than a pitch that moves directly out of the hand. My goal for my two-seam fastball is very similar to my goal for my cut fastball. I'm looking for 4 or 5 inches of movement. Just on the two-seam, it should go arm side as opposed to the cutter going glove side. To do this, I'm going to generate the axis of rotation almost exactly opposite of the cut fastball. So the ball is going to be coming off my middle finger last as opposed to my pointer finger. That's going to allow me to get the axis shifted to the point where the left-hand part of the ball is slightly closer to the plate than the right-hand side of the ball along the axis of rotation while still creating backspin. It's important to remember again that it is a fastball. We're not trying to create a whole lot of movement. 4 or 5 inches is perfect. Hopefully mostly lateral movement, not a whole lot of vertical movement for this one. And you're going to get a lot more mileage out of that because you're going to be able to throw it for a strike a lot more, and you're going to be able to make it look like your four-seam fastball and your cut fastball, as opposed to two seams that get a lot of movement. They're harder to throw in the strike zone, and they deviate from the path of other pitches a lot quicker. When I single step through this, you're going to see that the ball is coming off my middle finger last, and my hand is slightly on the inside part of the ball when it leaves my fingertips. That's what allows me to create the axis of rotation that I'm looking for. Again, pronating through the pitch, not pulling down behind it, not a whole lot of wrist movement here. The wrist is locked in, and the forearm and the shoulder is doing most of the work delivering the baseball. My slider is very similar to my cut fastball. My wrist is just slightly more turned, allowing my hand to be slightly more off-centered on the ball. This allows me to create an axis of rotation parallel to the line of travel of the ball. This allows for slight vertical break and slight horizontal break, and allows me to take speed off of the ball compared to my cutter. So it's still going to share the initial line of my cutter, just break out of the strike zone when my cutter will stay in the strike zone. Notice when I slow it down that I'm still pronating through the pitch. I'm not coming around the front of the ball. I've heard a lot of coaches teach a slider by kind of getting around and in the front of the ball and pulling down in the front to create the spin. Doing it this way, I'm actually staying behind the ball and getting through it, allowing me to create a healthier deceleration pattern as well as more RPM on the ball, which allows for a tighter break, allows me to minimize the movement, which makes it look like my other pitches a lot longer. This pitch can be called a lot of different things. I call it a reverse slider because I want it to act almost opposite of my slider. It can be called a screwball, a sinking fastball. It acts like a left-handed cut fastball, but I like the term reverse slider for myself because it paints a clear picture in my head of exactly the movement I want to create and how to create it. So if we think back to the slider, I created an axis of rotation parallel to the line of travel of the ball, with the ball spinning clockwise if you're looking at it from behind the mound. To get the ball to break the other way, my hand has to be on the inside part of the ball as opposed to the outside part of the ball. This will create a counterclockwise rotation if you're looking at it from behind the mound, and we'll have the ball dive down and in to a right-handed hitter. This typically comes in about 4 miles to 5 miles an hour slower than my four-seam fastball, and gives me a nice alternative to run the ball away from lefties or run it down into righties. You can see when I slow it down that the ball actually comes off of my middle finger last. So it's important on this pitch to have the middle finger on a seam so you can generate extra RPMs and you have something to pull down on. Also, notice how my wrist isn't doing a whole lot here. I'm not trying to create the movement or the rotation with my wrist. I'm just letting my forearm and shoulder take over as my arm transitions from acceleration to deceleration and goes through the pronation process. My changeup is very similar to my four-seam fastball, except it's thrown with the ring finger and middle finger instead of the middle finger and pointer finger. This allows me to take velocity off of the ball while still maintaining good arm speed and good initial trajectory. I'm trying to create the same axis of rotation perpendicular to the line of travel, create as much backspin as possible. In this case, I'm trying to tilt the axis so that the right-hand side of the ball is slightly lower than the left-hand side of the ball along the axis of rotation. This is going to give me a little bit more vertical movement as the ball travels to the plate, and it's also going to allow me to generate a little bit of arm side run on this pitch as well. You'll see when I slow it down that the ball is actually coming off of my middle finger last, so I make sure to have that on a seam so I can pull down on it and generate rotation. Again, we see that my hand is pronating through the pitch instead of trying to pull down. I've heard some people teach a changeup by pulling your palm straight down to try to take speed off. That's not how I go about it. I want to generate as much spin as possible while still taking velocity off. That way it allows me to share the same initial trajectory as all of my other pitches. This is probably the pitch that's taught incorrectly most often. Some of the coaching cues I've heard is pull a lampshade down, karate chop, stuff like that. Pull your hand to your left hip. That's really not what is going on here, and those are not healthy and safe ways to throw a curveball. What you want to see is you want to see the hand actually pronating through the release again, and it's hard for people to understand how this is possible because in order to generate front spin, your hand has to be on the front of the ball. That's true. In this case, you want to do it by having your forearm start in a supinated position, so it's starting to go from supinated to pronated as the ball is coming out of your hand. You still release the ball with your middle finger in front of the ball. That's how you generate the 12-6 rotation. And the axis of rotation is going to be same as a four-seam fastball, hopefully, perpendicular to the line of travel. Just instead of having backspin, it'll have front spin. You can see when I slow it down how my hand actually pronates, is going through the pronation process as the ball is coming out of my hand, and my arm continues to go into the pronation process and into pronation after the ball comes out of my hand. So this allows me to have a good deceleration pattern and save my posterior chain, my posterior shoulder. Also, you can see that my middle finger is the last finger to contact the ball on the front. So it's important to have that on a seam so you can generate the spin that you're looking for and the RPM that you're looking for. This is really a fun pitch when you get good at this and you get the feeling of doing this. Oh, before I forget, don't try to manipulate this with your wrist. Lock your wrist in and manipulate your forearm with your wrist connected to the forearm. That'll allow you to pronate this pitch a lot better. And what I was kind of getting at is it's fun because when you get a good feeling for pronating it, you can mess around with how much you pronate it, and sometimes you can generate the axis of rotation still perpendicular to the line of travel, but with the right-hand side of the ball shifted slightly up compared to the left-hand side of the ball on the axis of rotation. And this is the same axis a left-hander would have on his curveball if it was a little bit more of a slurve, if it wasn't 12-6. So I can actually get the ball to break down and into righties on occasion by doing this. But it's really fun pitch to play around with. So the keys for it, though, just to reiterate, is lock your wrist in and pronate through it. Don't try to pull down in front of it or karate chop it. That's going to allow you to generate much better RPM in a much safer way. The split finger fastball is a pitch that you don't really want a whole lot of rotation on. So I'm not really worried about the axis of rotation because I'm not generating movement by spin around an axis. I'm generating the movement with a lack of rotation. Basically, the ball is going to squirt out of my hand, it's going to squirt out of my fingers, my middle finger and pointer finger, almost at the same time. And the lack of backspin on it is going to allow this pitch to start off on a fastball trajectory and then die. It's going to lose a lot more velocity as it goes to the plate than a fastball will, and it's going to lose a lot more elevation because of that. So you can see when I slow it down that the pitch does actually squirt out of my pointer finger and middle finger at the same time. Also, I'm pronating through this pitch. Common misconceptions on a split finger fastball is that you're on top of the ball pulling down. Not really. You're behind the ball. You're getting through the ball by pronating through it, and the ball's squirting out of your fingers as your hand transitions from acceleration to deceleration. A couple key points on this is you want to lock your wrist in. If you're trying to manipulate your wrist, chances are you're going to catch the ball a little bit off center, and you're going to generate some spin that you don't want, which is going to minimize the actual movement that you get, and it's going to minimize the effect that it has on the hitter. Also, probably the most important thing on a split is to have really good shoulder rotation into your launch, into your release point, even though I hate that term. This is going to allow you to drive the ball in a straight line towards the plate, which positions your hand and your wrist in a position that when the ball squirts out, it's going to share the fastball trajectory laterally. It's not going to deviate directly out of your hand, which is going to allow you to share a fastball plane and trajectory a lot longer, which is going to be more deceptive from the hitter's standpoint. Hopefully this video is helpful for you guys. If you have any more questions about stuff that I discussed or anything else related to pitching, leave me a comment. I'll try to get back to you when I can. I do have to thank a couple people, Jim Wagner of ThrowZone for letting me use his facility to take this video, Kyle Bodie of Driveline Bases for helping me understand some of the concepts I discussed in here, Brent Strom, Ron Wolforth, I've worked with for many years on developing a lot of these different pitches and understanding about them, and Perry Husband for really teaching me the nuances of why being able to generate different movements and minimize the movements is so important. So go ahead and check out their stuff, their websites, if you can. A lot of great resources and great information out there. And I'll try to get a video up sometime soon of how I actually go about practicing all these different pitches and ensuring that I'm pronating through them and that I have the right axis of rotation and the right break on them. But for now, hope that helped, guys.